Thank you. Okay, your hosts today are AK,
And Ivana?
and today we have the pleasure of inviting a guest to the studio. Welcome, Vivek.
Hi, everybody.
Vivek, you're a business leader with a focus on a combination of business and people-driven innovation. And your motto is breaking silos with a smile, and I love that. And in your LinkedIn profile text, you also mention the challenge of performing in the business and transforming the business. And I'm very curious to hear more about this challenge from your perspective. So was hoping you could elaborate for the listeners.
Yeah, thanks, Ivana and AK for having me on the podcast and the show. First of all, really interested context that you have with this Maneuvering Mondays podcast, book chapters, whatever you are doing as a competition.
Thank you.
Really unique perspective for me at least. So I think that's good work on that, and all the best. Yeah, so I think when you talk about performance and transformation, I think as a business leader, I think I enjoy this um, double challenge that most senior leaders today are facing. Right, you are with the VUCA world that we live in. There's always this transformation that's happening around us, and there's always the need to keep performing on behalf of the business, on behalf of the customers, as an ongoing challenge. So there's this sense of performing and transforming that has to be handled in parallel, in my opinion, and that's a challenge that I enjoy and thrive with. Some of the things that Ivana and I were initially discussing was from our experience of leading self-managed teams at East Shearing. We had this dual challenge that okay, we had a technology project that was trying to transform a traditional hydraulic steering business into modern electrohydraulic and full electric business. So think Teslas for tractors and combine harvesters. So you can imagine just the technology and the technology innovation that's needed for that, and together with trying to grow that business from just one or two customers to a significant scale, we had to also consider that should we not try to do this in a very unique self-managed setup, because then we would be even more agile to work with the ever-changing demands of the customer, because the technology is so new, and the requirements kept changing and evolving as we went along. We just felt that maybe not just the technology but also the organizational setup that we tried around that would be a good approach. And I think I'm very proud to say that in spite of COVID and all the other challenges that we faced, we surpassed all our own expectations. We grew the business significantly, and developed it from a technology project and R&D project to a cross-functional business unit, and a successful business unit at that. So that's maybe a little bit about the perform and transform examples from my side.
Yeah, and that's an amazing example. And when trying to write to you on LinkedIn, Vivek, I was doing it with shaking hands, because I was like, "Woo! If he would actually respond, that would be so awesome." Because I've been following the transformation that you were part of in Danfoss, and really respect your leadership style and your courage for taking on this dual experiment of both the technology side and also the organizational side. So happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
And also, it's been such a pleasure preparing with you for this episode, and I'm really happy to start sharing the good conversations that we've had so far with our listeners. But just to help people follow, where are we in the story? Could you, with your own words, summarize the story part for today?
Yeah. So if I were to summarize the chapter for today, I think it starts in my memory with the introduction of the strange and stress-related behavior of one of the employees at Zebra Apps, Willie, and the investigation of the root cause of the same by Marie and her team. I think in the uncovering of the root cause by Marie and her team, it comes out there is a topic both of the disparity of pay and also a sense of feeling ignored for Willie. And I think Marie, decides that she wants to confront her counterpart in operations as a aspect of that, and actually it's a very aggressive take she takes with her counterpart, even threatening him, and that kind of slowly starts to open up much broader can of worms in terms of pay disparity, not just for Willie, but for the broader engineering organization between older employees and the newer employees, and leading to almost a public rebellion at the workshop that Marie and her team were conducting. So that's my summary of the bigger chapter.
That was
That's a
spot on. Sorry, Ivana, go ahead.
no. I was going to say the same thing. So we agree.
Yes, perfect. Okay, Vivek, but of course we're really curious to hear, like, reading this with your background and experience, what are the main themes you see here, and did you think of any theoretical frameworks or models that would apply in this context?
Yeah, I think the model or the key word that jumped at me was dysfunction, and dysfunction. When I think of that, the most famous model I know, of course, is Patrick Lencioni's model of the 5 dysfunction of a team. And I just kind of felt almost all of those 5 elements being hit at throughout the whole chapter. Starting with the lack of or absence of trust between Marie and Paul, which led to fear of conflict or avoidance of conflict, which should have been a healthy conflict earlier in the discussions if Marie and Paul had taken those discussions, or facilitated by Mark himself as their leader, which kind of felt like there was no common commitment between them on how to coordinate challenges that are organizational wide between the development organization for Marie and the ops organization for Paul, which leads to a lack of accountability, of course, in these cases, and the end leading to the bad results of losing good employees. That's just seems to be like the classical example of a model that I could consider when I saw this, when I read through this chapter.
And that's a really good framework to apply this lens to. And we were just joking earlier that dysfunction is probably one of the key topics of the book in general. But I think especially in what we were reading today, we see several sides of how this, especially the tendency to let things fester, really makes things escalate way more than they had to. And I would be curious to hear more about if we think about this lens of dysfunction and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, where do you see some examples of this perhaps lack of trust?
Yeah, I think starting with Marie herself, right? I think if my reading through the summaries of the earlier chapter, she comes across as a very conscientious HR professional, and she would be, with her experience, quite well knowing about the importance of trust in peers and in her teams, right? And for her to not take action after the initial conflict with Paul, when he had a different approach on how he wanted to take on, I think I don't remember what kind of activity it was, but Esther over Hannah, if I remember the characters itself, because Marie was preferring that the more let's say, practical experience of Hannah versus the more competence and theoretical knowledge of Esther might be a better fit for some of the tasks that Paul was thinking of. It's fine that Marie had a challenge on Paul and his approach, but as a new member to the team, she should also have had the time to kind of work with him and challenge him in a more healthier way, and understand him before challenging him. And that's fine that you challenge and then you move on, but then as soon as you sense there is a sense of conflict or a sense of withdrawal from Paul, which clearly she has sensed it, she should have been the one to go first. I think that's the main part. When you have a lack of trust, and you are aware, or you have a sense that you have at least some contribution to that conflict, I always encourage to go first. And I think that that's the part that Marie should have taken up first, and maybe had a chat with Paul much sooner.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I was a bit surprised about Marie's attitude when confronting Paul in this episode. I think she was being very aggressive, and I think that should be a very red flag to her that she felt that way going into that meeting and not being able to have that conversation in a more normal way than what they did. It was like a very power struggle feeling in that meeting.
Yeah, if I think about the the stages of conflict, and how conflict progresses, even the title chapter of the title of the chapter, right? It's either you or me. That is the final stage of conflict. You try to progress from disagreement to personification to trying to get further and further apart in the level of communication or the lack thereof, and it ends up with becoming personal. It ends up becoming either you or me, no matter what the idea might be. So you stop being neutral to what the issue or the idea is, but it's just because you said it and I don't like you, that it becomes a conflict of personality rather than of a healthy dialogue or discussion on the topic.
Yeah, and it's funny that in this story we can follow the conflict all the way back, like we just talked about. It started with this first disagreement on Esther versus Hannah for a specific role, and then it just escalated from there until we have this big confrontation where Marie, at least as we know her so far, uncharacteristically aggressively attacks Paul, because they've moved away so far from each other. But if you are in this polarized state where there's no longer room for both, how can you get back from there?
So honestly, in such extreme polarized states, so because it's like you have first a disagreement, then you have a personification where you try to fix some of the issues, then you start to enlarge the problem, then you start this is the stages, right? Say, oh, the problem that you started with is not the only problem, then you start to uncover other historical problems. And then the discussion stops. And I think when the discussion stops, that's where I think it's the most important that a facilitator like Mark himself should have stepped in and kind of tried to help Marie and Paul to discuss, because he also knows that there was clearly a big disconnect between Marie and Paul. So I think that's, in my viewpoint, if the individuals themselves do not resolve it before the discussion stops, then that's the stage when I would recommend to have at least a facilitator, neutral facilitator, discussing between the two conflict people, to try to resolve that in a good way. Because from there onwards, it starts to becoming magnifying the enemy, open hostilities, like the way that Marie and Paul took, and then there is no room for both, like Marie literally threatening Paul that she would ask Mark to choose between herself and Paul, and she well knew that with her experience and her background at Zebra Apps, that Mark, if he were forced to choose between the two, then he would go for Marie herself, right? So that's it's almost too late to go to that discussion, but hoping that both are HR professionals and it's not too late, then I would still get to a facilitation discussion between Mark, Marie, and Paul, and have that as an ongoing basis, which I think is also a critical thing that would bridge the gap. You said silos with a smile is my motto, because
Yes.
between operations, HR operations, and the silo between HR development is very clear, and to an extent, Mark is also accountable for that. So yes, Marie should have done something. And Paul, because he was the newcomer to the team, so I would put less accountability on Paul for that. But Marie and Mark should have stepped up and should step up in this situation.
Why do you think? Go ahead, Heikki.
I just had a quick comment. I just wanted to say that I really like your perspectives here, and I think that something you also said in some of our prior conversations was this statement that it's interesting how Marie is tasked with figuring out this culture issue, and there's like a lot of dysfunction in the company, but the dysfunction really starts in her own team and in her own department. So it's very much like it's ironic that she's trying to fix something that is actually she's part of that issue, I think.
Definitely, and I think and the conflict between two senior leaders is never just a conflict between them; it's between their teams. So the silos that start to form between their teams are also even more hurtful for the organization, because teams can sense where the conflict is between two senior leaders also, when they have some common discussions or the lack thereof. So I think that's an important element. And then I still remember one of these lines where it's a small line that says, Mark says that you don't know the pressures that we are under or I am under, and that sends me to even more signals that this dysfunction is not stopping at Marie and Paul's level, but is continuing upwards at Mark and his peer group, Natalie and her team's level with Frank and others.
I would be curious to hear your thoughts on why doesn't Mark just step in and help them figure this out?
I think there could be different reasons for it. I think a could be that mostly he might have been thinking that it's something that Marie and Paul should solve themselves, and that he had other topics on his mind that Natalie was trying to focus on. I think Natalie was clearly gunning for HR department as a whole. It sends to me, because of the significant people dropping or leaving the organization. So I think there was a sense that he was under pressure from Natalie on the reasons on the people retrenchment in such a or people leaving, sorry, in such a large number, that he probably has not paid attention to the dysfunction in his own team as a cause of it, and maybe just thinking that it could be something that Marie and Paul solve themselves.
Hey, I would also be curious to hear your thoughts on like after the confrontation that Marie has with Paul. Paul speaks to Mark, but then Marie speaks to Mark also, and Mark basically tells her that he would actually pick her if he had to make a choice. What do you think about a leader taking sides like that?
I think that was unwarranted. I think that was definitely unwarranted. I think Mark should have had the balance to actually use that discussion to kickstart the healthy conversation between, because he started with saying, I wanted you to discuss your museum of failures or something like that, if I remember right. So that was the right topic. But then admitting that that he would have chosen Murray anyways, it's something he should have kept to himself, in my opinion. And because it puts Paul in an extremely volatile, and thin ice, I would say. And if I was Paul, I would, if even I had an inkling of that, then there is no reason. He's already under a lot of pressure with dealing with Frank and a situation. A lot of people leaving. Why would he want to stick around when clearly his boss has a favorite?
But I also thought, like, we also don't know if Mark said the same to Paul. It has previously been, like, in the story previously, there's been, at least Marie feels like Mark is playing games. And I think maybe he is, but I definitely also think that Marie is reading things into his actions that might not be real. But yeah, we don't know. Maybe we will learn more about Mark's motives as we unfold the story.
And definitely, I think it would be interesting to see where Mark's motives are and his thought processes are in this as the book unfolds.
I'm curious to hear your perspective on if Marie, Paul, and Mark, if they wouldn't fear conflict, if they would deal with their issues and disagreements, would we have a book?
I'm sure you would have a book on other conflicts, right? So I think the way Natalie, or when I was reading some of the summaries that AK you had shared with me, right? The way Natalie was approaching the whole topic itself, saying, HR fix it, can be a book in itself. The way Shane and his being an intelligent jerk and his attitude can be a book in itself. So there are so many aspects of the book that I think can be a book in itself. So I don't think you would have been in any shortage, especially when really using this creative freedom to let the story evolve as with the characters. So each of these characters can have their own different version of Maneuvering Mondays.
I think you're right. I would also be curious to talk about Shane a little bit, because we have this whole we have this person who was hired into Zebra Apps from a competitor. He is one of the root causes for a lot of conflicts in Zebra. He's the whole reason why Willy snaps and spreads sugar everywhere. So who is this Shane, and what's his deal?
Yeah, no, at least from my past experiences, I read Shane as an intelligent jerk. I think we were discussing in the pre-meeting that some other people had different interpretations of it, but my interpretation is that he's an intelligent jerk, and I think that's in most cases that's very unhealthy for any team and organization. So if it's got nothing to do with his competencies, it's got nothing to do with his knowledge, nothing to do with his abilities. It is purely an attitude issue, and I think that should be addressed very clearly to him and monitored if he is progressing and improving on that and being a more team player. Actually, this particular topic of him talking about the pay disparity is the only topic where I'm actually happy that he is being a little bit of a jerk, because I think that actually brings out the issue itself, because it's a pretty widespread issue of pay disparity, which is well known to Jenny, the VP of engineering. She's signing off on significantly different pays for the new people, right? So it's not something that she should be surprised by, that some people will talk eventually, and some of this will come out. So as any responsible manager, she should have been aware about that. But except that issue, the whole other aspects that he was clearly knowing which buttons to press and pressing them repeatedly doesn't make sense for me to have a person like that in the team for too long, unless that person is really working towards improving their attitude there.
I would be curious to talk more about, well, the good thing that Shane brings about, which is actually surfacing this issue of pay disparity. He brings it about, bragging about it, how brilliant he is to get double the pay of the other engineers. But is it good practice to have that kind of disparity between different people? Is it just a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Or should we be more transparent about our pay practices?
I am a believer of more transparency. Doesn't mean the same as full transparency of everybody's individual salary levels. I think more and more organizations are now publicly, even on LinkedIn's or on the job postings, putting the ranges of salaries of the job. Right, the moment you put that range of the salaries for a particular job, everybody in that particular organization working on similar roles, they can read the job description very clearly, right? So they will evaluate their own jobs and competencies and what they're contributing with their own compensation, and they will have those discussions. So I think as a manager, we have to be proactive about addressing pay disparities. That's at least been my experience. I have had experiences where there were some significant pay gaps between some of the employees in my team and what should their normal level be for the role, and we have had to make those extraordinary increases, and sometimes it was too much. It is, the gap was so much that we had to do it in two steps, but we were very transparent, saying that, hey, it's a significant gap, but we'd like to address it. We cannot do it in one step, and we'll do it as.
No, we were just talking about Shane and the pay disparity issue, and I just wanted to ask you, so is it bad to have pay disparity if no one finds out?
I think if you ask me, I think for me as a leader, I am proactive about it to address it. I think I can't speak for all leaders and their approaches. I do believe that risk of it coming out, now I'm talking about within a certain range, right? So when you're talking about double the pay, that's what I'm talking about. So there are always going to be pay disparities because of some reasons. It can be experience, it can be some special education, it can be due to geographical differences in compensation. There is a certain bandwidth for similar roles that I would find as acceptable as differences for reasons for pay for similar kind of roles. But I guess that's my own whatever 5 to 10% maximum bandwidth that I would keep for, and not excluding geographical differences, but for all others it will be within that 5 to 10% bandwidth, assuming there is other factors like experience or specific knowledge or competencies that XYZ person might be bring to the table. But other than that, I am a believer of reducing that pay disparity proactively as a leader, and I put it as the accountability of the leader to ensure that happens, or the disparity does not happen. Yeah, hoping is not a strategy. That it will not be found out, and it's something that you will have to address. It's fine to say transparently to some people where you see the gap that, hey, you're aware and you're working towards it, and that's something that you may not be able to do immediately, but you will address it as soon as you have the opportunity to do the same. I think that brings a lot more trust in you as a leader, for the individual also. losing the trust of that person, and then losing that person altogether. You know that you are having to pay higher salaries for new recruitment. So when I hear leaders say, oh, I don't have a budget for a pay increase, but the moment you lose the employee and you have to refill the position, your budgets are suddenly finding hiring budgets are finding the space in it. So I don't understand why the hiring budgets suddenly are 25, 30, 40%, whatever the case might be, higher than the existing salary budgets. There has to be some sort of balance between the pay for the existing people doing similar work compared to the new people doing that work.
So just one more follow-up question within this topic. So Willie, the corporate rebel who pulls off the whole canteen stunt, what do you think it says about him that he finds out about this pay disparity and he doesn't quit, but instead he orchestrates this whole happening in the canteen?
Well, I think the best example I actually liked was the difference between the two engineers in the end, right? So forget Willie. The two engineers in the end, they had two different styles, right? One was like, really publicly complaining about the big pay disparity and how the new guys are being unfairly paid, and the second guy saying, I'm gonna keep quiet, I'm just gonna use all of this and then find my own way out, right? So you will have all of these different types of personalities. And Willie, for example, he was he was probably of a profile that was internalizing that stress, right? He was already stressed out about the whole sugar thing, and being a diabetic. If he was if Marx, the whole soda machines thing, he was stressed out already about that, and then the pay disparity only just triggered that even more. So I think it was Willie's issues are probably broader than just the pay disparity. And I think I think such information will be acted on differently by different people in the team. Some will be very rebellious, some people will be internally stressing out like Willie, and some people will keep quiet, and then suddenly you will find their resignations and they would have moved on. I don't remember now who was it. There was it Annie, or who was the character who had left, who was a very good team member, and I think she had left, and I think people were surprised that she had left. Well, I think that could have been in many of these cases.
Yeah, I agree.
I would also be curious to ask, because for Willie, we have this employee who started out as a janitor in the company, and then the company invested in his training, retrained him to become an engineer, and here he is after many years with the company. The company has invested in him. He has invested his time and skills in the company, and also he's undergone this journey from someone who was uneducated or poorly educated to becoming a specialist. Is it possible to learn in a workplace with and people changing their minds about your skill sets as you gain more and more proficiency in your area, or would they always remember you as the janitor?
Very good question, actually. I think it's a very person-driven context, right? Because that's probably what reminds me of the example of Hannah versus Esther, because clearly Paul did not recognize or maybe even was curious enough to understand what Hannah could bring to table. He just saw that she was not university qualified for that job. Even though she might have had the practical experience for it. I think there is more and more a tendency of businesses now saying that the professional qualifications might be optional even in some cases, right? So I can see that there are much more job postings that they bring a parity between people who might be professionally qualified and people who might have studied on their own. I think coding comes to mind. A lot of software engineers, they're saying that some of the smartest ones are not necessarily who have gone to the best universities, but those who have self-studied and put in a lot of hard work themselves. So by getting them to pass a coding test that the company wants it to pass, then you take away the disparity that might be there from an education point of view, and that could be for various reasons. It could be because of monetary reasons. It could be because of other gaps that might be there between the two characters who choose to do a professional education versus not. So I think there is a trend towards that, but I think still the need of professional education is a very high expectation, and I think it's not something that I think will go away very fast. So I think still a lot of people, for their mental simplicity, because you just imagine you're trying to apply, trying to open a job application, you will have significant number of applicants. So when you are having, all of them are strangers to you, so when you are just filtering based on resumes, you see an Ivy League college and a high score, and you see someone who self-studied. You based on this blank neutral information, you are leaning towards this Ivy school person. Although I think there is a TED talk that I saw recently about where this lady was talking about where the person from the Ivy school was having the silver spoon, and the person who was self-taught was the scrapper. And she was recommending to always go for the scrapper. I'm not so black and white. I think there might be good cases where you might want to have the scrapper, but I think I wouldn't call it the silver spoon. People who have gone through Ivy Leagues may have also had a very tough story and a difficult journey themselves. So I don't see it's a black and white choice between professionally educated and self-taught people.
This is an area where I think I have changed my mind a bit over the years of experience that I've had. Raised by Russian parents who believe that education is the most important thing in the whole world. I had the thinking that, well, of course you need to go to university, and anyone can do it. It's just about applying yourself hard enough. And then over time, I have discovered that, well, both that the university may not give you all the skills you need. It gives you a certain kind of skills and shows something about that you're able to study for 5 years. But learning by yourself and motivating yourself to learn and having that continuous learning mindset may or may not be present with someone who has a university degree. So I've become more nuanced in this space myself. And thank you for sharing your perspectives on this too.
No, I have had concrete examples where I chose for the role somebody with more professional education, because that was the only difference. I had very good feeling with the interviews for both the candidates. I chose somebody who had more professional education, and that person for their own reasons moved away 6 months into the role, and I immediately went back to the number 2 candidate who was more self-taught, and that person was shining very brightly. So I'm happy I had a chance to
You saw both.
to do that. So it was a good story for all party included. But like I said, I chose initially a professionally more qualified person, but then the longer success on the role was coming from the less professionally qualified and more self-taught person.
Thank you. I also, before we end, wanted to get into to talk a bit more about the character Jenny and the dysfunction of avoidance of accountability, because I think you mentioned previously on this call in the beginning when we talked about the 5 dysfunction of a team, that we do see some avoidance of accountability there. What do you think of Jenny's? What do you think is Jenny's role in this dysfunction in the company?
Well, I think she has a very strong role. I think she clearly knows that what is the pay disparity that is happening in her team, right? And if it is one-off person, if there is a one-off person and there is a very unique skill set that person is having that is so rarely available, and that's what's creating the pay disparity, then that would be visible also in the roles and responsibility of that person vis-a-vis the other people on the team. So for her to hide behind do your HR magic, Marie, or whatever. I think that's just complete lack of accountability on her side, and I think she should be. She is very much accountable for the pay disparity in the engineering team and the rebellion and the mutiny that she is facing herself. So I think she has a strong contribution to her own team's challenges.
I'm also curious, when we're talking about Jenny, we also talk about a female engineering leader in a world that has traditionally been very male dominated. Do you think that impacts her way of behaving?
Oh, that's a tough question, because I cannot think of if that is the reason, because I think there are more and more hopefully there are more and more female leaders who are able to take those traditionally male positions, and I think it's happening more and more. So I don't think that should be the reason for Jenny to offer a pay package, right? So it doesn't matter whether she was male or female. The fact was she was giving double pay to newer employees than older employees, and that would be wrong. For if it was maybe things like more nuanced aspects of masculine, feminine aspects, that might be a difference in the way that she was handling. That could be a case. I don't think so. I think there is, as leaders, there is always I have feminine qualities in me and have masculine qualities in you. So I am more of a believer that we have masculine, feminine in each of us, and that we have to bring our both sides to work, and at least in this case, I cannot see that her being a female leader in a male stereotypical role of head of engineering is at all a reason for this disparity in pay.
And I would tend to agree. And sometimes it's a topic that can cloud bad behavior among leaders. That has nothing to do with that specific agenda. Going back to the notes.
Me too. Just wanted to make sure that we cover everything before rounding off.
I feel like there's more we could talk about in the 5 dysfunctions of a team, but we've also talked about it.
Yes.
Here, let's see. Is there anything you feel we need to talk more about, Vivek?
I think that I think it's a long session. I don't know what size of a. I feel like I was talking too much, so I'm trying to reduce my communication volume more and more, but not successfully yet.
Yeah. Then let's start round.
Yeah.
Go ahead, AK.
Yeah. So Vivek, one of our last questions is always to ask our guest expert what they either hope will happen next or think will happen next at Zebra Apps. So would you please tell us your thoughts on where you would like to see this story go or what you think will happen?
Yeah, So I can only talk from the base of this chapter, because I don't have the other chapters and things in my mind to kind of have a broader future. But I do hope that that Jenny and the team around her do get to solve this pay disparity and address this pay disparity topic. I think it's going to be a critical issue for them to be able to stop losing a lot of employees. I would like to personally see a clarity on how people like Shane are addressed, because this whole topic about culture is very critical to the organization, and what you tolerate in your organization is also part of your culture. So I think intelligent jerks like Shane have to know that that their behavior is unacceptable in many cases, and that is addressed professionally, and that they do work on that. I think that's important, that that is part of it. And I think finally, Mark's team, so Mark, Marie, and Paul, hopefully they are having more regular chats and discussions, but they are also discussing what's happening in the leadership team above Mark, and able to handle that, because I think that is even more longer term critical for Zebra Apps to be successful as an organization. So I think the culture and the way that Natalie and her team operates is a very important indicator for the culture of Zebra Apps, which percolates all the way down through the different departments and organizations. So those are my three hopes of what happens. But let's see.
Thank you.
And Vivek, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I feel like we could continue the conversation even into more different avenues, but we will stop here. Where can our guests find you if they have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think they can find me on LinkedIn. My emails are available there. It's viv.menon@yahoo.com. So if you wanna reach out by email or on LinkedIn, I'm available. So happy to discuss and debate and even take quite strong arguments on different perspectives. It's important to have healthy differences in perspectives.
There's no conflict avoidance here.
No. Try not to, at least.
It's good. Thank you.
Thank you
This
so
has been an
much.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Ivana and AK. Really, it's been a great pleasure having you guys, and have a good weekend ahead.
Thank you.